show that's 3 dimensions away from Ghostbusters Afterlife being called Ghostbusters 3. I'm your host 3D Jake, and today we're looking at Ghostbusters Afterlife, released in 2021. Now, before we get started, I did a collaboration with a good friend of mine, Zack Milne, from Zack Talks Movies. Now listen, I want you to hear his review of this movie because he's a great YouTuber. I honestly highly recommend him. Great, always has great feedback, great honesty. Like this dude, great. I enjoy, him, leaving comments and just giving the feedback. I really appreciate that. I even started to leave comments in his section. He's just such a good guy. I honestly highly recommend you guys just go and check out his channel, like and subscribe, but hear his reviews and then come back when we'll talk about Ghostbusters, okay?
What's up? I know this isn't quite right, but they're the only 3D glasses that I could find on short notice. They're real 3D, so they still count. Excited to be here talking about Ghostbusters Afterlife with you, Jake. Now, I'm not the biggest Ghostbusters fan. I actually don't have much nostalgia attached to this franchise. I didn't even see the first film till I was late into my teens. Didn't really care for the second film and didn't even bother watching the 2016 version because there was just so much controversy around it that I just didn't really care. But going into Ghostbusters Afterlife, I was a little bit more optimistic because I knew that they were going to have the continuity connect to the original Ghostbusters films, which is something that I know the 2016 movie did not do, which bothered a lot of fans. On top of that, you had the son of the original director, Ivan Reitman, as in Jason Reitman, coming in and directing this thing. So there was a lot of promise going into Ghostbusters Afterlife. And one of the things that I think Ghostbusters Afterlife got correct is the cast. Because the cast in this movie is great, especially McKenna Grace. A lot of the marketing revolved around Finn Wolfhard. It seemed like he was going to be the primary focus of the movie. But the focus being on McKenna Grace's character and her being the granddaughter of Egon, and the film giving her the intellectual traits of Egon, I think works really well. And McKenna Grace does a lot in this movie to balance her character, because a character this young, this smart could get annoying real fast, but McKenna brings so much charm to her that I don't just tolerate her as our main character, I'm satisfied by her as a main character. She's great. And her little relationship with Podcast, I think all that works well, as well as her relationship with Paul Rudd. He brings a lot of earnest charm into this movie, and his relationship with McKenna Grace's character is very sweet. I do wish that Paul Rudd was in the movie a little bit more. He kind of shows up and then he disappears for a while until we get into the later third act. And as mentioned before, Finn Wolfhard, he's not really given that much to do in this movie. It's really great to see him in here. Big fan of Stranger Things. I don't think he's bad in the movie. And when he does finally get in on the Ghostbusters action, I'm pretty happy with it. But I do wish that there was just a little bit more Finn Wolfhard's character. Maybe we'll have to wait until Frozen Empire for that. On top of that, going with the nostalgia of Ghostbusters and connecting this to the original's continuity, there is a lot of references and Easter eggs to the Ghostbusters mythology, and it's a lot of fun. I really do enjoy how much they include the past Ghostbusters technology, past Ghostbusters storylines, the news footage showing the Ghostbusters on New York Day during that first film, I thought was great. Now, I do think that the nostalgia starts to get a little bit heavy-handed at points in this movie. I mean, the whole Walmart promotional sequence with Paul Rudd, I think, is just a little bit too much. And then you get those little Stay Puft Marshmallow Man running around. Could have done a little bit without that, but it's also hard to say that because they're just so freaking cute. Of course, the big nostalgia is when that original Ghostbusters crew come back into this film. And it's nice to see them. I will admit the third act of this movie is kind of where I have my biggest issues, because up until the third act, I think the movie does a pretty good job standing on its own, being its own story, as well as a continuation of the Ghostbusters franchise. But then once you get to that third act, they kind of redo the third act from the first film. You get Zool back in here, Possession, the Keymaster, all that kind of stuff. I just kind of get a little disappointed that it sinks so much into retreading old waters when up until that point, it'd been pretty fresh and original. But like I said, it is really nice to see the original Ghostbusters team come back in here. I mean, even the homage to Harold Ramis, the way that they handle Egon and his death is done pretty sweetly. I mean, it could easily be manipulative. It could easily feel like they are exploiting him. I never really get that sense from the ending of this movie. I think it works very well for the story. When his hand comes in and helps McKenna Grace with that proton pack, I honestly get chills. I think it's very sweet. And then, he doesn't say anything, but the way that they kind of give each Ghostbuster a moment to say goodbye to Harold Ramis and Egon, I think was handled pretty well as well. As best as it could be for a movie like this. All in all, I'll say that Ghostbusters Afterlife for me is a very nice homage to the Ghostbusters franchise, as well as continuing the story and this world pretty decently. And based on the trailer from Frozen Empire, I'm pretty sure we're going to get a lot more Ghostbusters references. It may feel like it's going to tread old water the same way, but these are fun movies. I enjoy these movies. This is probably my second favorite of the Ghostbusters movies that I've seen. I would give it a solid recommend, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with Frozen Empire. Big shout out to you, Jake. Thank you so much for having me on to talk about Ghostbusters Afterlife. It was a true honor, and I hope you, me, and everyone watching all enjoy Frozen Empire when it comes out. Take care.
Thank you so much once again, Zack, for doing this. I really appreciate it, man. Thank you so much. And if you can, just give him a like and a subscribe. He's an awesome dude. Trust me. He's just such a nice guy. And you follow the channel because he does live streams. I believe every week, he tries to do a live stream, and they're really fun live streams. They're great. I highly recommend it. So check out his channel. Thank you once again, Zack. Now, Ghostbusters Afterlife, released in 2021, is directed by Jason Reitman, son of Ivan Reitman, who is the director of Ghostbusters 1 and 2 and a producer on this movie. A hardcore producer because he even was on set every day. That's how hardcore he was. So basically it's almost like he was directing the scenes and literally would tell Jason Reitman, you got it. He would tell Jason Reitman certain scenes you should do this, this, and this. And if he didn't have a scene, he was like, you need to do that again. So it was almost like he was spiritually directing Ghostbusters 3 through his son. And so that's what it felt like. And this movie is a continuation of Ghostbusters 1 and 2 and ignores the female-led reboot released in 2016. This movie picks up, I think, 30 or 40 years after the events of Ghostbusters 2. Wait, that's not right. I think it takes place 20, 30 years after the events of the original Ghostbusters 2. And so I think so basically this movie is essentially a sequel to that, but this is the third film. But you don't have to watch those two movies to understand Ghostbusters Afterlife, because this movie, even though it is a sequel to Ghostbusters 1 and 2, it acts as the beginning of a new trilogy, if you will. So I really enjoyed this movie. This movie stars McKenna Grace, Paul Rudd, Carrie Coon, Daniel Kim, Finn Wolfhard, Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Ernie Hudson, Ann Potts, and Sigourney Weaver. I really enjoyed this movie. This is a fantastic movie. I mean, this is literally the Ghostbusters. I was really hoping for a Ghostbusters movie, third movie, for years. And I know there have been development hell where they were going to make one called Ghostbusters in Hell. I know after part 2 come out, that got crushed by Batman 89. So they never got to do a third film. So in the 90s, Sony thought about making a third film with them. But Dan Aykroyd and Ernie and Harold Ramis, whatever, wrote a sequel. And then, of course, the movie never happen because of what happened with, Ghostbusters 2 didn't do well, and then of course that kind of hurt Bill Murray, and so he's like, I don't want to do a third one. And then also you read the script, said the script was terrible, and then of course they kept for years trying, we're gonna do part 3, and then of course nothing ever happened. So then of course after years went by and they thought they had a script, they were about to go into production, and Bill Murray finally said, nope, we're gonna do it without him. And then of course Harold Ramis died, and then of course now they did the female-led reboot, and now after that movie didn't do well, they're like, people want the original Ghostbusters back. So and then Jason Reitman's son's like, I have an idea about a female Ghostbuster, but it's a kid. It's more like kid Ghostbusters, but the original crew come into this fold, and it makes sense logically. The movie is essentially about Egon Spengler passes away, and then his family moves into this house, and then of course they find out he used to be a Ghostbuster and all this stuff, and they try to they're in a financial rut and everything. They're just trying to pack up all the stuff and sell it. But then the kids find release a ghost and everything, and they try to basically take over the family business and try to capture this ghost and everything. And then of course while the teenage son is just trying to get a job and try to be independent more, while the kid just really wants to solve the mystery of the ghost busting and stuff. And with her a psychic, and you could tell she's kind of the Egon Spengler of this movie, and you could tell the Daniel Kim's character is essentially Ray from the original Ghostbusters, and you could tell the Peter Venkman role is kind of the Peter Venkman role is kind of Finn Wolfhard, and the role of and then his love interest in the movie is kind of like Ernie Hudson's role. And so you can see these characters are essentially just Ghostbusters that are going around hunting ghosts and trying to bust ghosts, because that's how they chase this one creature called Muncher. And I know people have said that the biggest dislike of this movie is all the homages to the original 2 Ghostbusters movies, but I'm like, wouldn't you want that? I mean, wouldn't you be disappointed if there was there was no references to old ghost busting and none of that stuff. It was just like a plain movie that you're like, okay, if you change a few things, it's not a Ghostbusters movie. Wouldn't you want it to feel like a Ghostbusters movie? Because I'm gonna tell you now, Ghostbusters 2 has a lot of homage to the first movie. Ghostbusters 1 is literally full of references and stuff like, that they created. So I mean, you really can't say homages because they created their own homage. But like, yeah, I mean, like, but then like anytime, even the 2016 movie has homages to the original movie, and the animated series has homages to the original movie, and the video games have homages to the original movies. I mean, everything they make is homages. I mean, so I'm like, say you can't really complain about that because every single thing. I mean, wouldn't you be? You'd be more disappointed if you went and said, "Yeah, this movie had no homages whatsoever." Like it just felt like if they changed two things, it's not even a Ghostbusters movie. That's what you would be saying if they didn't have homages in the movie. I guarantee you'd say that. And you know what? Look, it's fine if you don't like that. I love homages. Okay, I love fan service and homages. I love that. I love it so much. I love that. I mean, that is so great. Like to me, I like how like in the trailer they were building up, and I love how the trailer you hear Bill Murray's voice saying, like, call it fate, call it love. I love that aspect of it. Like I remember I didn't get to see it in theaters, and I was kind of bummed I didn't get to see it in theaters. So like when I really was like really excited to see this movie, and so when I finally got around to seeing it, I was just so excited. I was over the moon to see this movie. And then of course when I watched it, I was kind of disappointed because my biggest thing was I did not feel like this was a Ghostbusters movie. Like that was my feeling. Like I feel like if you like, I mean, I felt like I'm like, okay, there's things that are Ghostbusters in it, but it felt like Jason Reitman was telling this story over here about a brainy farm girl, and then he cooked this, and then he felt like he took an element of Ghostbusters and then included it together, and that's what kind of irked me because I was like, I really, really wanted to love this movie. I should be like, oh yeah, like everyone loves Afterlife, and I'm like, I felt like I wanted to love it, but I couldn't because I'm like, why don't I like this movie? And that was my biggest thing. Is like it doesn't feel like a Ghostbusters movie. Like at the end of the movie, when he in the post credit scenes, when he goes back to New York with the firehouse, that I think that was my favorite scene because it felt most like a Ghostbusters movie. I'm like that to me is what felt like. I mean, there was a couple things that I really liked in the movie. Like I like when Gozer come back, like how it had all the dates like from the original movie up to this movie, and then you have Ivor Shando, and then he basically is played by J.K. Simmons, who's a Jason Reitman alumni, and he basically like she cuts him in half and kills him, and like I like how it's played by Olivia Wilde. Yeah, Olivia Wilde plays her, and because the original actress is like old now, and so like Olivia Wilde plays her, and I like how. It's like, and then of course the original Ghostbusters come back, and I like how they called the number, and Dan Aykroyd still has the Ray's occult store. I like that aspect, how they show up and everything, and like they have the whole callback to where like, are you a god? And they're like, Ray, and then like, come on, Ray, like, oh come on, like when Bill Murray's, oh come on, Ray, and he's like, yep, we're all God, like, and then Bill Murray tries to sweet talk, and I just thought that was great, and how they get zapped again. It's just so fun, and everything, and I like how like they're. Like you see, like how like the two dogs, like they do the whole dog reference again, like especially at Walmart. The whole Walmart sequence I loved with the teacher. The teacher played by Paul Rudd was so good. I love Paul Rudd's character because he's so funny in this movie. I would say he is the closest to a probably. I would say maybe like I mean maybe I could say I could see him as. I know in he's gonna be in the new one. He's gonna be like the Bill Murray character. I would say in this one because he's not really the Bill Murray character. I would say he's more like the Lewis character in the original. And I really like the fact that there's a lot of stuff like I did like how they call him the Dirt Farmer and all that stuff, and I like how they brought Harold Ramis back in a post-credit CGI cameo, or not in the post-credit, but in the CGI role because it's like he would have been in this movie if he would have been alive, downright guarantee. And so I like how they bring him back to send his character off. I like that aspect of it. And I also liked how the Ghostbusters kind of hated him now because he took all their stuff and they're like left him like bankrupt. That's why I kind of like that aspect of it. It kind of feels like what happened after the events of '89 when they got the key to the city. And I liked how like how they defeat this Gozer once and for all. And I kind of was hoping like, oh my god, is a giant marshmallow going to show up? And I was kind of bummed that a giant marshmallow didn't show up again, but I understand it'd have been way too like on the nose, and I get that, because that was by Ray's mistake in the original movie. And so I did enjoy that you get to see them defeat her rather than just like she pulls an entity and they destroy the entity. because I think that how they trapped her, I thought was really great. And I also answered a big question I've always wanted to answer: what happens if you trap the dog? Will she still be vulnerable? And that actually answered that question. And I also liked how, that he was ready. Like Egon was ready for for Gozer's return, and then of course how she tries to rise up, and Ivor rises up, and then of course he puts her back down, and then he goes back to sleep. But then how the dogs destroy the proton pack so she can rise up. I like that aspect of it too, and I liked how there are dogs at the end. It's a callback with all the marshmallows, and they're covered in marshmallow. It's like how he has a podcast, and he only has one listener or whatever, and it's Ray, that's the listener. He's like, this episode really took off. I just like that aspect of it, and I thought that was really great. It was really fun. I really enjoyed this part of the movie. I just felt like most of the movie, it just felt like this doesn't feel like a Ghostbusters. The first two acts didn't feel like a Ghostbusters. I feel like the third act's when it really felt like a Ghostbusters movie, and that's when I really goes engaged with. Once we start the Walmart upward, that's where I felt okay, now I'm invested. But as for the first two acts, I just felt like I don't care about the farm story. I just did not care. I just felt like, you know what, I'm fine with this. I don't care. And I also was kind of bummed they didn't use the Ghostbusters theme song at the beginning with the logo. I was like, where's that at? Come on. But other than that, I did enjoy this movie. I just didn't love this movie. I would say I would rather watch the 2016 film over because it felt more like a Ghostbusters movie than this movie, and that was my biggest issue. But if I had to give this a grade, I would give it a B+. Thank you so much.
It has a gunner seat?